My daughter showed up at my door this morning with a box of old photographs. She didn't call ahead. She never does. When I opened the door and saw her standing there with mascara running down her cheeks, I knew exactly why she came. She held up a picture of her mother and me on our wedding day, and she said, "Daddy, I need you to forgive me." I told her to come inside, but I couldn't promise her anything. She sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I eat breakfast alone every morning, and she cried for 20 minutes straight. I wanted to hold her. I wanted to tell her everything was okay. But I couldn't because nothing about the last 6 years has been okay, and lying to my children is something I swore I would never do. After she left, I sat in the backyard with my dog and stared at the sky until the sun went down. I need to tell this story from the beginning, because if I don't, you'll think I'm the villain. Most people did. For a while, even I believed them. I met my wife Karen at a 4th of July barbecue in 1993. I was 26, fresh out of the Navy, working my first real civilian job as a project engineer for a construction firm in Charlotte, North Carolina. She was 24, a third-grade teacher with a laugh that could fill an entire backyard. I remember she was wearing a white sundress and holding a plate of deviled eggs she'd made from her grandmother's recipe. I asked her if they were any good. She said they were the best in Mecklenburg County. She was right. 3 months later, I asked her to marry me. She said yes before I finished the sentence. We got married the following spring in a small church on the south side of Charlotte. Her parents sat in the front row, beaming. My mother cried the whole ceremony. My father shook my hand afterward and said, "You got yourself a good one, Daniel. Don't screw it up." I didn't plan to. For 23 years, I thought we had the kind of marriage other people envied. We had 3 children. Our oldest, Emma, became a physical therapist. She married a good man named Brian and moved to Raleigh. Our son Tyler graduated from NC State with a business degree and was working his way up at a marketing firm in Atlanta. Our youngest, Lily, was finishing her senior year at UNC Wilmington, studying marine biology because she'd loved the ocean since she was 4 years old. Karen and I built a life in a neighborhood where everybody knew everybody. I coached Tyler's baseball teams. Karen organized the school fundraisers. We hosted the block party every Labor Day for 15 years straight. Our neighbors called us the couple that figured it out. I believed them. Our 23rd anniversary fell on a Saturday in April. We didn't do anything extravagant. I grilled steaks. Karen made her grandmother's deviled eggs. We sat on the back porch, drank a bottle of wine, and talked about retirement. I wanted to buy a cabin somewhere in the Blue Ridge Mountains. She wanted to travel. We agreed to do both. That night, I looked at her across the table and told her she was still the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. She smiled, but something in her eyes didn't match her mouth. I noticed it. I filed it away. I shouldn't have filed it away. 3 weeks after our anniversary, I stopped at the hardware store to pick up supplies for a deck I was building in the backyard. While I was loading lumber into my truck, I ran into Tom Harding. Tom was a plumber who'd done work on our house over the years. We'd become friendly enough to grab a beer now and then. He helped me load the last board and we chatted for a few minutes. As I was getting in my truck, he said something that changed my life forever. "Hey Daniel, tell Karen I said hi. I saw her the other day over at that Italian place on Providence Road. She and that guy she was with seemed to be having a great time." He said it casually, like it was nothing. Like it was normal for my wife to be having a great time with some guy at an Italian restaurant on a Tuesday afternoon while I was at work. I forced a smile and said, "Yeah, probably her coworker from school. They've been working on some curriculum thing." Tom nodded, got in his van, and drove off. I sat in my truck for 30 minutes without starting the engine. I didn't say anything to Karen that night. I watched her make dinner. I watched her laugh at something on television. I watched her kiss me goodnight. I couldn't sleep. The next day at work, I couldn't focus. I told myself Tom was wrong. He probably saw someone who looked like Karen. Charlotte's a big city. People make mistakes. But the thing about trust is that once a crack appears, you can't stop looking at it. Over the next 2 weeks, I started paying attention to things I'd been ignoring. Karen was going to the gym 3 times a week instead of once. She'd bought new clothes, the kind she used to say were too much for a woman my age. She was protective of her phone, always keeping it face down on the counter. She started coming home late on Tuesdays and Thursdays, always with the same explanation: curriculum meetings. I didn't want to be the kind of man who goes through his wife's phone. My father raised me to believe that snooping was beneath a man's dignity. So instead, I did something I'm not proud of. On a Tuesday, I told Karen I was driving to a job site 2 hours away. I drove to Providence Road and parked across from the Italian restaurant Tom had mentioned. At 12:30, Karen's white Honda pulled into the lot. She got out wearing the new dress she'd bought the week before. 10 seconds later, a black BMW pulled in next to her. A man got out. He was tall, gray at the temples, wearing a sport coat. He put his hand on the small of her back as they walked inside together. The gesture was familiar, comfortable. This wasn't new. I sat in my truck and watched through the restaurant window. They sat at a corner booth. He reached across the table and took her hand. She didn't pull away. She smiled at him the way she used to smile at me. I felt something inside my chest crack open like a bone breaking in slow motion. I drove home and sat in the empty house for 3 hours. When Karen came home, she kissed me on the cheek and said the curriculum meeting ran long. I said nothing. I didn't eat for 2 days. I couldn't think. I couldn't work. Finally, I called my buddy Steve, a retired detective who'd worked homicide for Charlotte-Mecklenburg PD for 20 years. I told him what I saw. He didn't say much. He just asked me one question. "Do you want to know who he is?" I said yes. 2 days later, Steve called me back. His name was Richard Hale. He was a 51-year-old financial advisor who lived in a gated community 20 minutes from our house. He'd been divorced twice. His second ex-wife had left him for the same reason I was sitting in my kitchen, staring at the wall. And here's the part that made me throw up. Richard Hale had been at our Labor Day block party. Not once. 3 times. He was a friend of our neighbor Dave and his wife. He'd stood in my backyard, eaten my food, shaken my hand, and told me what a lucky man I was. The following Tuesday, I came home early from work. Karen wasn't home yet. I sat at the kitchen table with a glass of water and waited. When she walked in at 6:15 with her hair freshly done and her lipstick reapplied, she froze when she saw me. "You're home early," she said. I nodded. "How was your curriculum meeting?" She set her purse down slowly. "It was fine." I took a breath. "Was it at the same Italian place on Providence Road, or did you and Richard find somewhere new today?" The color drained from her face. I'd never seen anyone go that white that fast. She grabbed the counter to steady herself. Then she started talking. Fast, desperate. It wasn't what I thought. They were just friends. He was helping her with financial planning for her retirement. It was innocent. Nothing happened. I let her talk for about 2 minutes. Then I stood up and said, "I saw you, Karen. I sat in the parking lot. I watched him hold your hand. I watched you smile at him the way you used to smile at me. Don't lie to me. You owe me at least that much." She sat down and started crying. And the truth came out. It had been going on for 8 months. They met at Dave's Christmas party. One thing led to another. She said it was a mistake. She said she loved me. She said she didn't know why she did it. She said she was sorry. Every word felt like a nail being driven into my chest. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I said, "I'm going to stay at a hotel tonight. Don't call me. I need to think." I packed a bag and walked out the front door. As I pulled out of the driveway, I looked in the rearview mirror and saw her standing at the kitchen window, watching me leave. She looked small. I drove to a Best Western off the interstate and didn't sleep for 3 days. I called Emma first. She was silent for a long time after I told her. Then she said, "Oh God, Daddy, I'm so sorry." Tyler was different. He said, "Dad, are you sure you're not overreacting? Maybe it's not as bad as you think. People make mistakes. Maybe you should hear her out." I hung up on him. When I called Lily, she didn't say a word for 30 seconds. Then she said, "Where are you right now? I'm coming. Don't move." She drove 3 hours from Wilmington that night and checked into the room next to mine. She knocked on my door at midnight with 2 burgers and a milkshake. We sat on the bed and she held my hand while I cried. She was 21 years old, my youngest, and she was holding me together. Over the next week, Karen called me 40 times. She sent letters, she sent texts, she asked everyone we knew to talk to me. Our neighbor Dave and his wife showed up at my hotel room to tell me I should forgive her. I reminded Dave that he'd been the one to invite Richard Hale to my house 3 years in a row. He didn't have much to say after that. Karen's sister called and said I was being cruel. Tyler called again and said everyone makes mistakes and I needed to be the bigger person. Emma called and said she understood why I was hurt, but that I should at least listen to what Karen had to say. Only Lily stood with me without qualification. "Take your time, Dad. You don't owe anyone a timeline for your own healing." After 2 weeks in the hotel, I moved into a small apartment on the other side of town. I went back to work. I functioned. But I wasn't living. I was just existing. Every morning I woke up reaching for the other side of the bed. Every evening I set the table for 2 before catching myself. 23 years of habit doesn't disappear because your heart is broken. 1 month after I left, Karen sent me a letter. A real one, handwritten, 12 pages long. I opened it, read the first paragraph, and put it down. I picked it up again a week later and forced myself to read the whole thing. She wrote that Richard made her feel seen in a way I hadn't in years. She said I'd become distant after Tyler left for college. She said she felt invisible in our marriage, like I was going through the motions. She said Richard listened to her, complimented her, made her feel alive. She said it was never about the physical part. She said she knew it was wrong every single time but couldn't stop. She said she'd ended it the day I confronted her and would never speak to him again. She said she would spend the rest of her life making it up to me if I gave her the chance. At the bottom of the letter she wrote, "You are the only man I have ever truly loved. I know you don't believe that right now, and I don't blame you, but it's the truth." I wanted to believe her. Part of me did. But the image of his hand on the small of her back, her smile at that corner booth, the 8 months of lies, the reapplied lipstick, the fake curriculum meetings, the way she looked me in the eye every night and kissed me goodnight, knowing where she'd been that afternoon. That image burned through everything else. 2 months in, Tyler drove up from Atlanta. He sat in my apartment and told me I was ruining the family. He said Karen was falling apart. She'd lost weight. She wasn't sleeping. She'd stopped going to school. Her friends were worried. He said, "Dad, she made a mistake. You've probably made mistakes too. Why can't you just forgive her and come home?" I looked at my son and saw a stranger. "Tyler, when you get cheated on and someone tells you to just get over it, you remember this conversation." He slammed the door on his way out. 3 months in, I was sitting in my apartment on a Saturday night when Steve called. He said, "Daniel, I don't want to make things worse, but there's something you should know. I just found out that Richard Hale is telling people around town that Karen came on to him. He's painting himself as the victim. He's also telling people you threatened him, and that's why he stopped seeing her." I felt something I hadn't felt since the Navy. Pure, focused, cold rage. Not at Karen. At him. At the coward who stood in my backyard and ate my burgers, and then carried on an 8-month affair with my wife, and was now lying about it to protect his reputation. The next morning, I drove to Richard Hale's office. His secretary told me he was with a client. I said I'd wait. When he came out, he saw me and stopped dead. "Daniel, I don't think I walked up to him close enough to smell his cologne. You ever say my wife's name again, or my name, or spread one more lie about what happened, and I will make sure every client you have knows exactly what kind of man handles their money." That's not a threat. That's a promise. I turned and walked out. His secretary's mouth was hanging open. It wasn't violence. It wasn't revenge. But it was enough. Steve told me later that Richard Hale closed his Charlotte office 2 months after that and relocated to Tampa. His third client that week had been a golfing buddy of Steve's, and word travels fast in a city like Charlotte. 4 months in, on a Tuesday evening, Lily called me. Her voice was shaking. "Daddy, Mom's in the hospital. She passed out at the grocery store. They think it's her heart." I drove to the hospital in 20 minutes. When I got there, Emma and Tyler were in the waiting room. Tyler wouldn't look at me. Emma hugged me. The doctor came out and said Karen had experienced a cardiac episode related to extreme stress and malnutrition. She'd lost 35 pounds in 4 months. She wasn't eating. She wasn't sleeping. Her body was shutting down. He said, "Mr. Mitchell, your wife is asking for you. She's stable but weak. I think seeing you would help." I stood outside her room for 10 minutes. Lily stood next to me and said nothing. She didn't push me. She just waited. I went in. Karen looked like a ghost. She was thin, pale, hooked up to monitors, her hair limp on the pillow. When she saw me, tears rolled down her cheeks. She whispered, "You came." I sat down in the chair next to her bed. I didn't hold her hand. I didn't say anything comforting. I just sat there. After a while, she closed her eyes and fell asleep. I watched her breathe. I thought about the girl in the white sundress holding deviled eggs. I thought about 23 years of mornings and dinners and fights and forgiveness and children and holidays and the way she used to fall asleep with her head on my chest. And I thought about the corner booth and the hand on her back and the 8 months of lies. I sat there for 2 hours, then I left. Karen recovered physically. She went to therapy. She took a leave from teaching. Tyler moved back to Charlotte temporarily to stay with her. Emma came up from Raleigh on weekends. Lily called me every day. She never told me what to do. She just asked how I was feeling and listened to whatever I said. 5 months in, I made a decision. I filed for divorce. I didn't do it out of anger. I did it because I realized that even if I forgave Karen, I would never trust her again. And a marriage without trust is just 2 people sharing a roof. Karen accepted the papers without fighting. She signed everything. She didn't ask for the house or my retirement. She only asked for one thing, that I not cut her off from being a mother to our children. I told her I would never do that. Whatever happened between us, she was still their mother. The divorce was finalized in 3 months. It was quiet, civil, and the saddest document I've ever signed. After the divorce, I expected the community to understand. I was wrong. Karen's friends rallied around her. The narrative became that Daniel Mitchell abandoned his sick wife, that I was cold and unforgiving. That I broke her heart. Our neighbor's wife told anyone who'd listen that Karen made one mistake and I destroyed the family over it. Nobody mentioned the 8 months. Nobody mentioned Richard Hale. Nobody mentioned the lies. Tyler echoed the sentiment. You could have worked it out, Dad. You chose not to. Emma was more measured, but I could hear the disappointment in her voice. Only Lily never wavered. They weren't in the marriage, Dad. They don't know what you felt. You did what you had to do. I sold the house. I couldn't live there anymore. Every room had a memory, and every memory had a crack running through it. I moved to Asheville, about 2 hours west, and took a position managing construction projects for a firm that specialized in mountain homes. I bought a small house with a big porch overlooking the Blue Ridge. I got a golden retriever named Jack. For the first time in months, I could breathe. Lily graduated that May with honors. She turned down a research position in California to take a job at the North Carolina Aquarium in Fort Fisher, close enough to visit me on weekends. She said it was because she loved the aquarium. I knew it was because she loved her father. I didn't deserve her, but I was grateful for her every single day. A year after the divorce, Tyler's girlfriend found messages on his phone. He'd been sleeping with a coworker for 3 months. She left him. He called me, upset, wanting sympathy. I listened to him describe the pain of being betrayed by someone he trusted. When he finished, I said, "Now you know." He was quiet for a long time. Then he hung up. We didn't speak for 6 months after that. I started writing. Not because I planned to. I was sitting on my porch one evening watching the sunset, and I pulled out a notebook and started putting words down. At first it was just fragments, feelings, memories, moments I didn't want to forget, and moments I couldn't stop reliving. Over time, it became something bigger. I wrote about my marriage. I wrote about the betrayal. I wrote about the hospital room, and the divorce, and the friends who turned on me, and the daughter who didn't. I wrote about what it feels like to love someone for 23 years and then discover that the person you loved was partly fiction. I wrote every night for 5 months. When I finished, I had a manuscript of over 400 pages. I didn't plan on showing it to anyone. I just needed it out of me. But Lily found it on my desk one weekend. She asked if she could read it. I said yes. She called me the next day crying. "Daddy, this is incredible. You have to do something with this." I laughed it off. But she wouldn't let it go. She had a friend from college whose aunt worked at a literary agency in New York. Without telling me, she sent the manuscript. I was furious when I found out. 2 weeks later, the agent called me. She wanted to represent it. The book came out in October of the following year. It was called The Other Side of the Table. I didn't expect anyone to care about the story of a middle-aged construction manager from Charlotte who got cheated on, but it turned out a lot of people cared. The book hit the bestseller lists within 3 weeks. Suddenly, I was doing radio interviews and podcast appearances. Men wrote to me from all over the country saying they'd gone through the same thing. Women wrote saying the book helped them understand what their fathers or brothers or friends had experienced. A reviewer for a major paper called it a devastating and honest portrait of masculine grief. I didn't know what that meant exactly, but it felt like someone finally understood. The book tour brought me back to Charlotte. I didn't want to go. My publisher insisted. When I walked into the bookstore, there was a line of 60 people. I signed books for 3 hours. About halfway through, Dave's ex-wife came up to me. Dave and his wife had divorced the year before. Turned out Dave had been covering for Richard Hale the entire time, and when his wife found out, she was done. She handed me her copy of my book and said, "I owe you the biggest apology of anyone in this city. I'm sorry for what I said about you. I didn't know." I signed her book and thanked her. She wasn't the only one. Throughout the afternoon, former neighbors and friends approached me with apologies. People who had called me cold, unforgiving, cruel. People who had sided with Karen without ever asking me what happened. They'd read my book and finally heard my side. One man, a guy I'd coached baseball with for 10 years, stood in front of me with tears in his eyes and said, "I should have called you, Daniel. I should have been your friend when you needed one. I'm sorry." I shook his hand and told him I appreciated it. I meant it. But I also knew that those friendships were gone. You can't unbetray someone's trust, and you can't unknow who abandoned you when you needed them most. The last person in line was Emma. She was holding a copy of the book and crying. She said, "I read it in one night, Dad. I couldn't put it down. I had no idea. I thought I understood, but I didn't. I didn't understand anything." She asked if she could visit me in Asheville. I said yes. That weekend, she drove up with her husband, Brian, and their 2-year-old daughter, Sophie. It was the first time I'd seen my granddaughter. She had Karen's eyes and my stubbornness. She grabbed my finger and wouldn't let go. We spent the whole weekend on the porch, watching Jack chase squirrels while Sophie chased Jack. Emma apologized for not being there for me the way Lily was. I told her she didn't need to apologize. She was trying to hold the family together. That's what oldest children do, she said. I just wish I'd listened to you instead of listening to everyone else. Tyler called a week later. He didn't apologize. Not exactly. He said, Dad, I think I finally get it. What happened to me with Jessica? I kept thinking about what you said. Now you know. You were right. I'm sorry I told you to get over it. It wasn't a grand reconciliation. It was a start. I met a woman named Grace at a fundraiser for the Asheville Arts Council. She was a retired high school principal who had moved to the mountains after her husband passed from cancer 3 years earlier. She was funny, opinionated, and she didn't take any nonsense from anyone. On our second date, she asked me why I looked sad even when I was smiling. I told her about the book. She'd already read it. I know who you are, Daniel Mitchell. I read your book before I agreed to this date. I wanted to make sure you were worth my time. She paused. You are. Grace and I took it slow. She understood that trust was something I had to rebuild from the ground up. She never pushed. She never pried. She was just there, steady and warm, like a fire you can count on when the house gets cold. Lily approved. Emma approved. Tyler said he was happy for me. Karen, through Emma, sent word that she was glad I'd found someone. I didn't know what to do with that, so I just let it be. Last month, I turned 55. Grace threw me a small party on the porch. Lily came with her boyfriend, a marine biologist she'd met at the aquarium. Emma brought Sophie, who is now 4, and already telling everyone she wants to be a veterinarian because she loves Jack so much. Tyler came up from Atlanta. It was awkward at first. We haven't fully repaired things. Maybe we never will completely. But he was there, and that mattered. Steve drove over from Charlotte with a bottle of bourbon and a card that said, "To the toughest son of a gun I know. Happy birthday, brother." After everyone left, Grace and I sat on the porch in the dark. Jack was asleep at our feet. The mountains were black shapes against a sky full of stars. She took my hand and said, "This is good, isn't it?" I said yes, and I meant it. Not because everything was perfect. My first marriage ended in the worst way I could imagine. I lost friends, years, and a version of myself I'll never get back. My relationship with Tyler still has cracks. Karen and I are civil but will never be friends. Stuart, the boy I coached through Little League, the man who told me to get over it while his mother was destroying our family, he's only just starting to understand the weight of what happened. But sitting there on that porch with Grace's hand in mine, Jack snoring, the mountains holding up the sky, I realized something I couldn't see when I was drowning in that hotel room 6 years ago. Survival is not about getting back to who you were before. It's about becoming who you need to be after. I lost the life I thought I'd have, but I built a life worth living. And if you're sitting somewhere right now, staring at a wall, feeling like the world ended, I want you to know something. It didn't. The world is still turning. And one day, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but one day, you'll sit on your own porch, and you'll breathe, and you'll know. The best part of your story hasn't been written yet.